Hi, welcome to my channel English Audio Stories. Ready for today's English story? Let's go. The Vanishing Train. Ethan Cole stepped off the small regional train and onto the quiet platform of Greystone Station. The town was surrounded by hills and thick forests, and the station looked as if time had stopped there decades ago. Old wooden benches stood under a faded roof, and a rusty clock showed the wrong time. Ethan was a young journalist from the city. He had been sent by his editor to write an article about the legend of the vanishing train. According to old stories, 50 years ago, a night train disappeared somewhere between Greystone and the next station, Hawthorne Junction. The train and all its passengers were never found. People still talked about it in cafes, especially on cold autumn evenings. As Ethan left the platform, he noticed a tall man in a dark coat watching him from across the street. The man didn't wave or say anything, just turned and walked away. Ethan thought it was probably nothing, but he still felt a strange chill. The only hotel in town was a short walk from the station. Inside, the smell of old wood and fresh tea greeted him. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s, handed him the room key and asked, "Are you here for the story?" Ethan nodded. She leaned closer and whispered, "Be careful." Some people don't like it when strangers ask about the train. That night, Ethan sat by the window of his small room, looking at the railway tracks disappearing into the dark forest. In the distance, he thought he saw a faint light moving along the line, but when he blinked, it was gone. The next morning, the town was wrapped in a thin layer of mist. Ethan walked to a small cafe near the station to begin his research. The place was almost empty, except for an elderly man sitting by the window with a newspaper. Ethan ordered coffee and asked the waitress if she knew anything about the legend. She gave a quick glance toward the old man. "You should talk to Mr. Harris," she said quietly. "He was a boy when it happened." Ethan introduced himself, and Mr. Harris invited him to sit down. His eyes were pale blue but sharp. "It was the 14th of November, 1973, Harris began. "A passenger train left Hawthorne Junction late at night. It was full, maybe 60 people. Somewhere between here and there, it vanished. The search lasted weeks. No wreckage, no tracks in the snow, nothing." Ethan listened, fascinated. "How could a whole train disappear?" he asked. Harris shook his head. "That's the question no one can answer. Some say it was an accident covered up by the railway company. Others talk about stranger things." He paused as if choosing his words. "Lights in the forest. A tunnel that isn't always there." Before Ethan could ask more, Harris stood up and paid for his coffee. "If you really want to know, walk the old track tonight," he said, slipping a folded map into Ethan's hand. "But don't go alone." Ethan opened the map as the man left. A red line marked a short section of abandoned railway deep in the forest. The note beside it read, "Where it began and where it ended." That evening, the mist returned, thicker than in the morning. Ethan put the folded map into his jacket pocket and followed the narrow road out of town. The streetlights ended quickly, and soon he was walking under tall, dark trees. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold earth. After 20 minutes, he reached the point marked on the map. The main railway line curved away to the right, but an old, rusted track split off and disappeared into the forest. Grass grew between the rails, and some wooden sleepers were missing. Ethan walked slowly, his eyes searching for signs of the past. A broken lantern lay half hidden in the grass. Farther along, he found a piece of metal with faded paint, possibly part of a train carriage. He crouched to take a photo, but as he stood up, he noticed something strange. The forest ahead seemed darker than the rest, as if a shadow had settled there. He checked his watch. It was almost midnight. Remembering Harris's words, he hesitated. Then curiosity won. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The air grew colder. The trees seemed closer together, their branches forming a kind of arch over the track. After a few more steps, he saw a faint light ahead, soft, yellow, and moving slowly toward him. It looked like an old train lamp. Ethan froze, unsure if he should hide or call out. The light grew brighter, but there was no sound of wheels or engine. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the light blinked out. The darkness in front of him felt deeper than before. Ethan stood completely still, trying to understand what had just happened. His heart was beating fast, but he forced himself to keep walking. The track curved slightly to the left, and as he followed it, he noticed something unusual. A stone tunnel entrance hidden behind overgrown bushes. It wasn't marked on any map he had seen before. The tunnel's arch was covered with moss, and the stones were damp. A cold draft came from inside, carrying the faint smell of metal and smoke. It was impossible to see more than a few meters into the darkness. Ethan turned on his flashlight. The beam lit the old tracks running inside the tunnel, still intact but coated with dust and dirt. As he stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The silence was heavy, almost pressing against his ears. Halfway through the tunnel, he saw something that made him stop. On the wall, written in faded white paint, were the words, 14th November, 1973. They took us. The letters looked rushed, uneven. He took a photo and kept moving. The tunnel began to slope downward, which was strange. Railway tunnels were usually level. The air grew warmer now, and there was a faint glow ahead. When he reached the end, Ethan stepped out into a place he didn't recognize. The forest was gone. Instead, he saw an open field under a dark red sky. And there, in the distance, stood a train, an old passenger train, its windows dimly lit, as if waiting. Ethan realized he might have found the vanishing train. Ethan stood at the edge of the field, staring at the train. Its paint was chipped, and the number on the front matched the one from the old newspaper reports. He felt an urge to go closer, but something about the stillness made him hesitate. Finally, he stepped forward. The grass under his feet was dry and brittle, as if it hadn't seen rain in years. When he reached the first carriage, he looked through a window. Inside, passengers sat in their seats, perfectly still. Their clothes were from another time, coats, hats, dresses from the 1970s. Their eyes were open, but they didn't move or blink. Ethan walked along the train until he found an open door. A warm light spilled from inside. He climbed the steps and entered. The air smelled faintly of coal and perfume. As he passed each row, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest, as if the train itself was holding him there. At the far end stood the conductor, tall and thin, wearing a uniform with a silver badge. "You found us," the man said quietly. "But now you cannot leave." His voice was calm, almost kind. "The train needs new passengers. The journey must continue." Ethan took a step back, but the door behind him closed. The lights inside grew brighter, and the train began to move. Not on tracks, but across the empty field. Through the window, Ethan saw the tunnel shrinking in the distance until it disappeared completely. The red sky darkened, and the world outside became unfamiliar. The vanishing train had taken another traveler, and its legend would live on. Great job, you finished the story. Keep listening, keep learning, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.